Welcome everybody. So this is From Content to Conversation. We're going to be talking about SharePoint agents in Microsoft 365 Copilot. So to get started, in the style of all my sessions, I like to just kind of go over the topic at basic level. You know, there's a lot of terms out there flying around, agentic and AI and Copilot and agents and everything, and I really want to provide some clarity to this. So what I want to do is just go over the groundwork of what are we talking about when we talk about agents and SharePoint specifically, and then I'm going to spend a whole bunch of time demoing, like just a live demo in SharePoint. We're going to see the agents in action. We're going to build them. I'm going to show you what you can do with them, do some prompting. But then as you're building this and you're starting to see the power of this, admins may be thinking like, wait a second, like how can we control these things? So then I want to show you some of the governance settings and maybe some of those FAQs of things that you might be thinking about. Who can share them? Can I see them? Should I use a service account? You know, some of those questions. And then obviously time for Q&A at the end. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I want this to be interactive and just like I said, so you can walk out of here and maybe give this a try. So who am I? My name is Heidi Jordan. I am a Microsoft MVP for business applications. I work for Avanade. I'm a modern workplace manager. My tagline is SharePoint Girl, living in a Power Platform world. 2016 was a pivotal year, as we all remember, when Power Apps and Power Automate came out. And as we saw on the slide earlier, too, InfoPath is going away. Happy 1 year until the end of life support for that. So I think I said it in my last time I presented to you, but now is the time if you are needing to get off of InfoPath. So I'm fluent in all those things there on the page. Most recently, M365 Copilot has been my baby lately. So another couple things to notice on the screen. On the right side, there's a logo there for Bite Size M365. There's a fellow MVP. Her name is Pam DeGraffenried. She and I started kind of a podcast video series and where we just do little bit snippets of things in M365. So I think we have about 10 episodes out there and they're really like 12 to 15 minutes long and we just go over a topic. And I actually created a how to build an agent topic in preparation for this session. So if you go out there and check us out on YouTube, you'll see the videos out there. We're trying to get 1 or 2 out a month. So give that a try if you want to take a look at that. Oh, thank you, Pete, for dropping that in the chat. Contact information on the screen. Best way to get a hold of me is probably through LinkedIn, honestly. So let's move on here. So, okay, taking a step back, let's look at the groundwork. First of all, if you're going to talk about agents in SharePoint, you need to understand what M365 Copilot is. So I'm sure everyone has probably heard what M365 Copilot is, but what is it actually? So it's an AI-powered assistant that sits on top of your M365 environment. So it kind of has 4 different components. It has the large language model. So there's a large language model that Microsoft publishes that is just something that you can ask questions against that will provide responses. That's a very, very basic definition of what a large language model is. But then it's also integrated with the Microsoft Graph. So what that means is that you can, it can sit on top of your M365 things and collect things like your things you have access to in SharePoint, your emails, your Teams chats and everything. But then it's also embedded in those products. So the power of that is when I'm in a Teams meeting, I can ask it, summarize what was just said in the Teams chat and then go look for this email that I got last week about this topic and bring it all together because it's all interconnected and it's all sits in within our applications. But also Microsoft 365 Copilot is also contained in that M365 security layer there, so nothing leaves your tenant. So everything that the way you're interacting with this virtual assistant inside your organization, those prompts and that security never leaves. So that's why it's so powerful. And that's why so many businesses are so excited about M365 Copilot. So now to tack onto that, what is an agent? So I am going to get to SharePoint agents in a second, but I wanted to just define what is an agent. So an agent is really just an AI assistant that can help with those business processes and enhancing your productivity. The best way to think of this, I think, is a travel agent. So we know that there are travel agents out there and their job is to be, to go and research travel destinations. They know all the places to go. They know when to book the tickets. They know how to book the tickets and do all these things. They can do these actionable things too. But just to take the weight off of you and not having to plan your own vacations, you can go and talk to a travel agent and you can give them some qualifications like, I want to go on a trip with my family. I want it to be a beach. I want to go in this time period. And then they can take that information, go do all the heavy lifting and come back to you with a response. That's kind of what an agent is. So why does all of this matter? That's because with the M365 Copilot license, you actually have the ability to use agents in SharePoint. So that is rolled into the packaging of that and part of the licensing. So that's what we're going to go over today specifically, is how to build that SharePoint agent within SharePoint using your M365 Copilot license. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to flip over to demo. Like I mentioned, this is going to be mostly demo today. So let me change my screen share here and get the right window up. All right, and let me move this over here too. Oops. Sorry, just moving stuff around. Okay. So for starters here, when you are looking at a SharePoint site, so I have this SharePoint online upgrade site that I'm working on, and it's a couple document libraries, and I do have the M365 Copilot license applied in my tenant here to me. So the first thing you'll see in SharePoint with these agents is up in the top right, you'll see that there's a little Copilot icon. Sorry, I'm zooming in here. Oh, it's behind there. Go away. There we go. So there's a little Copilot icon here. If I click on that, so that shows up by default. So I did nothing to configure that, but that is actually an agent that is scoped to my site. So it's going to answer questions related to this site, and I did nothing to configure that. When I got that M365 license, that just showed up in my SharePoint sites. So you can see that it's got a couple starter prompts here. And the questions like summarize any key highlights, create an FAQ, how can I use these resources? So it's going to be scoped to the information on this page, like right off the gate. So what I like to do when I first see this agent here, I'm just going to ask it a question like, what documents were recently updated on this site? Because then I kind of know, like, I'm kind of testing the limits of it, of what is this actually scoped to? Like, what should I use this agent for? So you can see I just typed in pasted in the prompt, what are some recently updated documents on the site? So that gives me an idea of what it's connected to. So you can see right now it's combing through the documents, and then it's going to spit something out here. So these are documents that are actually located in my document library, but I just wanted to kind of give it a warm up of, again, to see what it is configured with right out of the gate there. So you can see it gave me a listing here of all these branch performance reports, these meeting notes that I've uploaded to the site. And then down at the bottom, it's got links to all those documents that I can go ahead and take a look at, or I can continue to ask questions about those things on the site. So this is cool. Like, this is already configured right out of the gate, but you may be thinking like, okay, this is great, but how do I actually like make it a little bit more, granular? Like, how do I make it more custom and configure it to my liking? So that's what we're going to move into the next, is when we actually can scope, cut these down a little bit and put them into more narrow scopes and build them on the library level. So I'm going to close that. So next up then is, let's go to the document library. So as with any, if you're thinking in the mind of SharePoint and document storage and how we architect solutions and everything, the Copilot agent is not enterprise search. So it's not going to work best if you just use that site agent and scope it to everything. The agent cannot, if it has too much to learn, you're not going to get the best results. So what we want to do when we start to create these agents in SharePoint is cut this down, break this down into usable sections for the agent, and make it a little bit more limited knowledge set for it to learn. So that being said, you might want to consider creating an agent on each of the document libraries that you have. Or if you have very large document libraries, maybe you want to move some things into smaller ones. So start to think about the architecture a little bit there. But very simply, I have a documents library. They've got some meeting notes, and this is what the meeting notes look like. I just wanted to show you. I'm also going to take you through the exercise of how I did this, because I think it's really important I love to just interject some of how I use M365 Copilot when I'm actually doing my job. So I was using this to create meeting notes for this presentation, and I want to show you what I did because I thought it was pretty cool. So I have just some meeting notes here. This is the week 1. These are all sample meeting notes about our SharePoint Online upgrade that we're doing. But what I did is I just went into Copilot, I opened up Microsoft Word, and then I gave it the prompt that just said, I had 1 week of meeting notes already. I said, create meeting notes for week 2, and then I referenced week 1 in there. So then as I built this out, I was able to create 10 weeks of meeting notes just by referencing the old ones in there. So you can see the prompt here says create meeting notes for week 10 based on these past 9 examples. And then I'm referencing these files. And if you don't know what that means, if you don't have an M365 Copilot license, referencing is when I hit the / and then it's pulling up all the things that Copilot has access to here. So I can reference of course it's not working because I'm on live demo, but I could, if I probably hit the limit actually, I think there's a limit of what you can reference. But when I hit the reference thing there, let me delete a couple out and see if it will actually pull up here. There. So I hit the / there we go. Now it's pulling up those files that I can reference. So these are all the recent things that I found that I can reference. Otherwise I could hit files, or I could even copy a link to those files that I want to reference. And what I mean by reference is now Copilot is looking at these things because I'm instructing it to the past 9 weeks and then create me a new meeting update for week 10. So that's kind of how I did the demo for this, to create all those sample files. So that's one way that you can use Copilot for that. So let's go back to the documents library here. All right, so we've got our 10 weeks of meeting notes. Now I want to create an agent that is scoped to these meeting notes so that I can ask questions about it. So first we're going to go over the out-of-the-box way to do this, and then we're going to go over how we customize it. So if you look in the ribbon, you can see there's create an agent. So I'm just going to click on create an agent, and then it's ready. So it's really like a one-click experience. There's literally 0 code required to create these agents. So the agent is ready for me now. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Open Agent. And then it's going to open up on the side panel here. So now I can start to ask questions. You see it gave it a name of just SPO upgrade because it took what was on the site here. And then it's got some starter prompts. And then I can start to ask questions of that agent. So I could say, give me the milestones of the SharePoint Online upgrade project so far. So I'm asking questions of those meeting notes. This is really good for, think of like stakeholders or anyone that is involved in a project but not directly involved. They can come out here and they can ask questions of the notes. You can be as granular as like asking about project status, like what status was it in? Was there any, any issues and were they resolved? You can ask it about a little bit more intelligent questions like that, like what were the follow-ups that actually helped resolve those. But keeping in mind that these meeting notes, this agent is only as good as these meeting notes that it's scoped to. So that might make you think about how you take meeting notes and where you're uploading them, and think about the maybe templating or standardization of those meeting notes, because if you're going to use agent to ask questions of those notes need to be solid. So if you look over here on the side, now we've got, here are some of the milestones. So you can see it says phase 1, here's some stuff from phase 2. It's just kind of pulling out some of those milestones for me, and then upcoming final ones. So that was just a very simple prompt of, what are the milestones against these 10 meeting notes with the out-of-the-box agent. So let's build on this a little bit more. Let me pause a second. If there's any questions, or I don't see anything in the chat. Okay.
Nothing yet, Heidi.
Okay, perfect. So we asked it a question. This is the out-of-the-box agent. So now let's build on this a little bit. So what we can do, so the prompt that I gave it, let's talk a little bit about prompting, because that is important with these agents, and then we'll go into how to customize the agent. So I just gave it the, give me the milestones for the project thus far. So if we want to work on a little bit of making these prompts better to maximize the outputs from our agent, there is this method from Microsoft that they've put out here. It's called the GCSD method. So when you are creating your prompts, you want to make sure that they have a goal, context, source, and expectations. So here it breaks it down. It says, what is your goal? So I want to create a list of 3 to 5 bullet points. What's the context? Like who's involved in it? Tell it a little bit more about why you're trying to accomplish that goal. The expectation is really how you can give it, tell it the output. So I could say, I want this in a table with, action items of who it's assigned to. And then the source would be tell it where you want it to pull from. Are you just pulling it? If you're talking to a SharePoint agent, you're probably just pulling from the documents that are in the library itself. So that one is a little bit less needed there, but that's kind of just some framework of how you can help, construct those prompts. And you can actually use Copilot to help improve your prompts with this method. So what I did to get some better prompts with this is I went to Copilot Chat, and I'm just going to open that up here. So Copilot Chat, if you just go to office.com, it'll drop you on the Copilot Chat screen, as you've noticed. And this works with whether you have a M365 Copilot license or not. But what I did here is I said, let me grab this. So I'm going to tell it, using this as the base prompt, which is the give me the milestones of the SharePoint Online upgrade project so far. Please use that GCSE method guidance for constructing the prompts to rewrite this. I'm telling it a little bit about, I'm going to be using this with the SharePoint agent. It's in the library. It's got weekly meeting notes. And then I want the output to be in a prompt that I can just give to my agent. So I'm telling it exactly how I want that output to. So then here, it gives me a much more wordy prompt that will actually get me probably a different output from the agent. So then what I would do here is I would just copy this, and then I would go back to my agent, and then I would just drop the prompt in here. So that was a little bit about, using that GCSE method. Prompting is a skill, it's an art, and it takes practice and iteration, but, don't work smarter, not harder. Use Copilot for this. This is the Copilot Chat can really help you enable you with these products and help you build your skills and not working so hard on that. So that's some guidance on that. Let's move into how we actually edit our agents now. So let me close this. So I've got my agent here. You'll notice that when I clicked on that, create an agent, it put a .agent file in this library. So if I want to edit this, I can go ahead and just edit. So now I could do some things like changing the name. I always recommend changing the name because, I'll show you in a second, but when we started at the very beginning, we went to the site and we saw the Copilot in the top right. There was a drop down and there was actually multiple agents listed. So when you create these agents, they're all going to be listed in your kind of agent selector menu. So if you're not very descriptive with your agent name, you may not know which one goes to which. So I would probably just give it the name of like where the documents are sourced from. So this is a bad example because I'm using the documents library, but this is actually meeting minutes from the SharePoint Online upgrade. So I'll just call it the SPO meeting minutes agent. And then here I can change the logo as well if I wanted to. I could put I've seen people put faces there like like an actual person because it's an agent helping them. So you can change that to whatever you want it to be there. Provided brief description. This is also a terrible description, so I would get rid of this too. I would say that, this agent can answer questions on the SharePoint Online meeting or upgrade sourced from the meeting minutes. So this will show, and when you hover over it and in the agent selector menu, which I'll show, but that's where this description comes in. Next thing here is for sources. So it says that agents can select up to 20 sources. So when you're building these agents, you don't have to build it and scope it only to the things that are in the library. So like this agent lives in the documents library right now, and right now it's talking to these 10 documents. If you have things that live on other sites, you can scope that into your agent as well. So what you need to do there is just punch in the URL of the site there, and then you can browse to it. But I'm just going to grab a document that actually lives on this site. So there is another library, I think it's called Learning. So I've got, oops. Let me close that. Try again. So I've got another library on this site called Learning. So I'm just going to click on this Add Document Libraries because it's on the same site. And then it's going to just pull up the other. So now I can go back in this breadcrumbs here, but I can click and I can see the other sources that I could have for that agent. So I know that I have some upgrade materials that I want that agent to return in this SharePoint upgrade project plan. So I can select that document as well and just hit select. So now you can see that this agent is sourced to the documents library right here, and then that one document from that where that project plan lived. I could have just selected the library where this lived, and then it would scope it to all agents, but you can see that now it is just that one document. There is a note here about up to 20 sources, and I am going to talk about that in a second. I'm going to skip over it right now, but I do have some documentation on that too. But that's kind of how you can add in those additional things. You could drop in the link to the SharePoint site and browse to that, and then you'll be able to see here where this agent is sourced from. So I'm going to go back and change this because I had not saved it before. Upgrade meeting minutes. I'm going to just do 714 so I know that it stands out because I know I've done this a couple times. And then the last tab there is behavior. So this shows you on the right side, you're seeing a preview of what your agent's going to look like. This is where you can change those things. So there's the welcome messaging. So I could, if I change this, you'll notice that on the right side, it's going to change. So if I delete that, you can see that it's just going to say welcome. So I can have a custom starter message there. There's also the starter prompts section. So think about, this is when your users come out to the meeting minutes, like there's probably a couple of burning questions that they have, like what are the follow-ups, like what status is the project in, things like that. So those are the things that you would want to put for your starter prompts because you want to make it easier for them, that they can click on one of those set things. And then agent instructions is just some instructions on how you want your agent to respond. So I think the best example of this is if you're building like an onboarding agent for new employees, you might say something like, this is an onboarding agent, you're an onboarding agent. This is for new employees, please be positive and don't say anything bad about the company or something like that. Just give it those instructions on how the agent can respond. I'm gonna leave the default settings here, but then I will go ahead and just save and close. I see there are some questions coming into chat here, so
oh yeah,
I will go.
I was just gonna hit you up on that because I think some of these
Perfect.
are pretty good questions relevant to what you were doing specifically. Okay. And then I think there was one thing I was thinking about. So somebody asked me relevant. So you have documents here in the document library. How well, and have you done anything with Copilot agents around doc sets or content types or those types of things? And then I'll also add on top of that, what about multiple levels of folders? Because, there's a lot of customers or there are people that are still using folders and folders and folders to be able to segment their content. So kind of what's your thoughts on those things?
Yeah, let's look at the sizing. So that goes back to the sizing, the multiple levels of folders.
Yep.
So this is what I have for the, what Microsoft says that you can include up to 20 source items. And this is, I get a little confused on this myself because it does say 20 files, 20 folders, 20 sites, and then some combinations. So I don't know what the actual limit is. Like, okay. I think that I just go with that guidance that, if you have thousands and thousands of things in your library, like it's probably not going to perform as well as if you were to narrow down the scope. So if you can try and make these agents be as narrow as possible, I think you're going to get the best performance there. But that's kind of my guidance on that, unless you guys have anything regarding clarifying on that.
I know I've heard, and Michelle, I don't know if you're on to talk about it, but I've heard if you go 2 levels down in folders, then it starts to not work so well. So get as much flat as possible. I think that will help, especially inside the libraries or the document libraries themselves. So that one, I think you need to that point, I think it also matters of how many items do you have in that document library? And then on top of that, how deep is it? I think that's the other thing to consider in thinking about it from here. And remember, this is not like SharePoint search, right? Those types of things. It's a much different way of doing things in general. So then I think the other question, so Bill asked about licensing, Grant was talking about licensing. I think we got that answered. If you have the license, you can create it, but then does somebody else have to have the license to be able to access that agent? The answer is yes. They would have to have the licensing to be able to access it.
Yep, I've got some slides on that too. When we're done demoing, okay. I do have some more governance and stuff, and licensing, yes.
And then Pete was asking, very interesting question. Can you add the site assets library to the agent and ground a Teams OneNote notebook?
Add the site assets library to an agent. Well, we're going to go over approved agents here too. I don't know, Pete. That's a good question. We should try it.
Yeah, I think that one. And then it was asking about site pages, if that's possible to be able to pull the content that might be in that site. Maybe it's a whole bunch of pages that a group has created that has FAQs and things like that on the pages versus documents.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's any here. Let's see, look what files are supported by. I was just going to see if OneNotes were supported. Oh, this is coming soon. OneNote notebooks.
Okay,
so
not quite yet.
That answers that.
It does. This link is really good for really what can be supported or what is supported by Copilot agents and SharePoint agents specifically. So thank you.
Yep. All right, cool. So we went over how to edit the behavior of that. Okay, so we went over to edit. So we were able to add sources. We can do that right at the beginning too. At the beginning of this demo, I just clicked on create an agent and then it grabbed, we just did open. So if I click on this again, let me show you. I clicked on open agent. We can click on edit, so we can do that right off the gate so that we can get the right sources with our agent so that we don't have to do, open and then go back to it. So you can edit that right away if you want to bring in some of those custom agents. So another point that I wanted to bring up too is, and we will talk about licensing and the governance stuff too, but just as long as we're going in through these. So yes, you can build a SharePoint agent and yes, it's scoped to these documents, but sometimes it's not the best for certain tasks that you're trying to do. So I want to also level set about, when you should be using it for what. So I have a financial reports. So it does work for Excel files too. So in the other one, we just did documents and it was just meeting notes. So it's just textual data. It does work for Excel. So I have some Excel reports here. So if we just take a look at one of these branch performance reports, it's got some data in here. So I can use the SharePoint agent to ask questions about the data. But I tried this in the agent here, and then I also tried it in Copilot chat and I got different results. So I wanted you to be aware of that, but I created an agent here for these Excel files. Let's open this one up. It's just called SPO upgrade because it's pulling the name of the site here. But then I gave it the prompt here. Compare these reports and identify which branch had the highest customer acquisition, loan disbursement, and NPA rates. And then we're going to do the same thing in Copilot chat, and you'll be able to see that there's differences in what it brought. So again, it shows you, it does that, the numeric data. It's breaking these out into the 3 different points that I asked for. But then when I did it in Copilot chat, let me go back to over here. I actually dumped it into a notebook too, so you can see the outputs. So here's the agent output that I just showed you, and it's got each of those separately. But then here is the Copilot chat output. So it actually created, I referenced the library that these are all located in. It put this all together in a table, but then it also had differences in the answers. Like it said, branch 41 led customer acquisition in February and March. But if I look at the table here, for customer acquisition, like branch 41 doesn't even show up on here. So be careful. I think that the agents are best meant for those questions about, the conversational things, the meeting notes, the textual, not so much this data processing that we're trying to do here. So I didn't want to show you an example of something that doesn't work, but I didn't want you to just trying to level expectations of what you should be using your agent for. All right, so the last thing I want to show you is how to approve an agent. And when we have an approved agent, what that means is that the agent is actually available in the site selector menu. So if we go back to the site here, and then when that icon pops up here, and this kind of leads into the sharing too that we're going to talk about. So when we first load this here, you can see there's a drop down, And then there's a couple different sections here. There's approved for this site, and then there's recent. So recent are the ones that I've worked with across my sites. So like this M365 Con agent lives on a different site. So this is just a roll up of all the agents that I've been working with. These two here are approved for the site. When you make this approved for the site, what that does is it actually moves it from that document library to the site assets, and then it shares it with everybody. So anyone that has visitor access to the site can use that and their M365 Copilot license, which I'm going to go over that in a second too. But the process of approving an agent, so I want to show you that now. So let's go back to the documents library. So if I want to make this one approved, I'm just going to go ahead and, oh, sorry, no, I have to go into the icon here. So I'm interacting with this agent. And then under the 3 dots here, oops, I need to change this to my make sure I'm on the right agent here, the 714. So there's a set as approved, and then this is what's going to put it in that approved menu. There's a couple other things here a couple other options. I am going to talk about copy link for Teams in a little bit, but there is the share, just like you would share with any user, like it gives you the link and then you can actually share that agent with them. There's edit, which we can change the data sources and the behavior, but then this set as approved, I'll click on that. It's going to say that it's only for site owners, so you have to be a site owner to set it as approved. But now when I click on set as approved agent, you'll notice that my .agent file disappears because it's being moved to the site assets library. So we'll click on that and then you'll watch this move. And it just takes a second and then you see it's gone. So now it's available in the site assets. And then now when I click on this menu for my agents, I can change to that and that one's approved for this site. You can also change the agent that is default. So if you, for example, if you have a user that goes to the SharePoint upgrade site and then we've got the agent right away on the right side here, you might want to default them to that agent that is scoped to those meeting minutes because you're like, okay, they're most likely coming to this site to look for those meeting minutes. So let's just make this agent be the default one, set as site default, so then that's the one that pops up right away. So that was that's how you get that approved for everyone. And then for governance sake and sharing it out, that is how you would want to share that out with your users. All right, okay, I think we're good on the questions here. So I want to stop on the demo and I want to go back to the slides and we can talk a little bit about sharing and what it takes to be able to interact with these agents. So let me go back to presentation.
I do one thing too, is I was thinking about some of the things you were talking about. You know, you mentioned that the fact that you can add different other sites to those agents as you're building things. How important is then to realize how much permissions factor into that if you're adding all these other sites, right? So you have one site, you may be deploying to that, and then maybe adding some other sites. You know, can I talk about that just a touch?
Yep, we're going to.
Perfect.
That's definitely, yeah. You know, these agents are really grounded on, you know, the agent doesn't give you any additional access. Like it accepts those, it respects those SharePoint permissions. So you want to make sure, this is in my tips at the end too, when you are grounding your agent, meaning you're creating it, you're choosing the documents that it's going to be, you know, sourced from, you want to make sure that those documents are available to anyone who would potentially use the agent. So think about, you know, communication sites are a good place for that because generally those are places where all users would have access. But if the user does not have access to those documents that you're selecting, their interaction with that agent is not going to be as good as it would if they did have access. So that is definitely something to consider. And that's why the agents, that's why I choose like meeting minutes, for example, because those are generally open to the whole org. So think about those documents that are open to the whole org when you are creating those. So let's go into the bit of the governance then. So if you've seen the agent, you saw that .agent file, like how does that sharing work? Like how do we actually share that with other people? So you can see there the first point that any user with edit permissions on the SharePoint site can actually share that agent with other people. So edit control or above can actually share that agent file with others. Sharing is done just like any other file. You saw that share button that I showed you, but you can share it with others. You can manage it just like you would SharePoint access on an actual item. And then I have a table there. So if a user doesn't have any access to that site, they cannot open the Copilot agent file. They can't see it. They can't do any interactions with that. If they have read rights to that library, they can open and view the agent, but they can't actually edit or duplicate it. And then they can see the agent, and then whatever access they have to the documents that are below it, that are grounded in it, that's the only thing that they would be able to do with that agent. And then I already mentioned those two at the bottom there, that edit and then the full control. Those are the users that can actually share that .agent file. And yes, you can actually pick it up and move it. So it is really just JSON under this hood. So you can export it or download it and move it to a different site if you wanted to do that. So who can use the agents? There's two ways there. So users with the M365 Copilot license can use them. You have to have an M365 Copilot license to be able to talk to that SharePoint agent. But the other option there is a pay-as-you-go option where you can pay to just have users interact with that SharePoint agent. And again, this still respects that security model of the documents that they have access to in that grounding. So as an admin, can I see all the SharePoint agents in my environment? As of right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone from Microsoft, agents are not included in the Copilot usage report, the SharePoint agents, meaning, and I'm going to show you that where that's located, but when you go out to the admin center, you look at all the agents across the tenant, the SharePoint agents are not actually listed there. So there is a usage report that shows you where the agents are that were built using Copilot Studio, but the SharePoint agents are not there yet. And I saw a thumbs up from Michelle, so that's good. So now I want to show you where you can do that. And then another way to share these agents, which is using them in Teams. So I'm going to stop sharing one more time and go back to demo. So let me share my screen again. So I was talking about before, first thing is an admin, can I see where all the SharePoint agents are? So you cannot, but if you wanted to see where agents were in general, if you go out to the admin center, and then I think it's under reports, and then there's a usage tab. There's all the different products here. If you click on the Microsoft 365 Copilot, there's a couple tabs here. There's readiness, usage, and then agents. So if you click on agents, this is where you can see all the agents that are deployed for your tenant. But again, the SharePoint ones are not in there, so you cannot find those in there at this point. But if you're looking for Copilot Studio ones, that's where you would find that. But going back to the sharing too, and how you can interact with these agents. So, we talked a little bit about the permissions that are needed to be able to see the agents and interact with them, and also the licensing that's required. But now you can actually embed them in Teams too. So if we go back to the agent, and I've got this agent that I set as approved. So that I set as approved for my site, I can now add this to a Teams chat, and then the users in that chat, and I can then @mention that agent so that we can get answers from it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do copy link for Teams. And then now it's telling me to paste this in a Teams group chat to add the agent. So I'm going to go over here to my chat that I have with Pam. And I did this earlier. I'm going to do it live now and see if it works. Otherwise, I did this earlier just to prep it. So now you can see that it's going to add this agent to our chat, and then we can ask questions of the agent. Now, Pam is an external, so she doesn't have access to the actual SharePoint data right now, but I can show you what that looks like with the demo. So that's adding to the chat, but I did this above here. You can see that it says, welcome, ask a question. So now those prompts that I was typing into the side of the SharePoint, in the SharePoint side panel, I can then do the same thing in Teams here. So all I did was I created a message and I just mentioned that agent. So now you can see that it's got this one there, and then I can ask questions of it. So what are the latest updates from the SPO migration? So you can see it took my starter prompts too that I had in that menu when I was customizing, and it took my welcome message here too. So think about that when you're creating those, and then you can add it to the Teams chat. So it's taking a second to respond here. Again, Pam does not have access because I didn't have time to do that before this call. But if she did have access, it would actually return all those results right here in the chat. But because she doesn't have access, it's thinking too hard. And then it will show me that, here's the results that that it's going to put into chat. But because she doesn't have access, it's prompting me with this result. So if she had access, this is what it would do. It would just return this, but this is what it looks like. So that was how we can add that to the Teams chat, and then we can leverage that SharePoint agent from Teams as well. So let me go back to the slides to wrap us up here, and then I'll address any questions too that are in the chat. Last time I'll switch back and forth. So me being a business apps person and someone who does a lot with like Power Apps and Power Automate, I was thinking like, should we use a service account to build these agents, to try and keep track of them all? I personally don't recommend using a service account to create SharePoint agents, and why is because these agents are not tied to a specific user. So once that agent file, that .agent file is built, it lives in the library. It lives in the documents or in the site assets library. So it doesn't technically have an owner. It's just if you have those inherent permissions, those SharePoint permissions, you're able to see that agent. And then if you have editor above, you're able to make changes to that agent. So also, if you have a service account, that would require an M365 license, M365 Copilot license. So then you would have an additional cost just to have a service account that would have access to all these agents. But then that agent functionality is based on SharePoint access, not the creator's identity. So then you'd have to, have this, the questions you're asking. You want to make sure that the agent would have access to all the documents and everything that that would be, sourced from it. So it wouldn't really work out there for a service account either. It's just really best to use the real user accounts for simplicity and transparency. So in short, no, I don't really recommend using a service account to create those agents. And then just some things to consider too. I mentioned before that consider what you're asking it. It might be better in Copilot chat. Sometimes, there's multiple tools for the job here. I think that agents are good for lighter tasks, like helping hands, like the in-context moments of questions or training. Like, if you're a new employee, I think they're really good for new employee experiences, them asking questions of like a PTO policy or where's the holiday calendar, like things like that. So those in-context questions, or even, like I said, the meeting minutes are a really good example of that too. Consider the documents that your agent's grounded on. You make sure that you double check the access so that users can actually see the data and make sure that they can access that, and they'll get those good results from the agent. Naming conventions are important. I talked about that too. Make sure that you have a unique name for your agent, but then also consider your flows if there's anything associated with the library. So if you are building agents in a library and you have a flow that's triggered to start on new or modified items, just know that that .agent file will trigger your flows. So I learned that the hard way kind of when testing, it was triggering flows. So just be aware of that it is actually an item in that library. So I'm going to pause there. That's kind of all I have for content. I did want to save some time for questions and any wrap-up items.
Yeah, I think there's a few questions that are in the chat. Todd. Oh yeah, Todd was asking about. All right, I don't know if would it be about SharePoint agents to do this or just Copilot in general, but would I be able to use Copilot to be able to pull information about the SharePoint site specifically, views, things like that? I don't know if you've done anything around that.
No, it wouldn't be about site usage. It's only grounded in the, the documents themselves. Yep, in the contents themselves. So no, but you can get some of that information from Search Admin, I believe. Like
exactly, or within the
like
analytics within the site, I think too.
Yep. Good question though.
Yeah.
And is the only way to show the agent on the site, or can you edit? Okay, so you can copy a link. Yep, we talked about that. Thank you for answering that there.
Yep.
Jason says, I see the risk with team members creating agents on the connected site. Yes. Thank you, Jason, for bringing that up too. Definitely communication sites, places that people can access all of the documents.
Yep.
Do you need to rebuild the agent when adding a file to the library? Ooh, good question. So that's definitely when you consider your architecture. So you can scope it to the folder. If there's a folder below it, here, let's just go back. Let me present my screen. It's easier to talk through when we can look at it. I'll go back into here. It's a great question. So it really matters with your architecture when you are building these. So, if we built the agent on this level, it's going to take all the documents that are inside of it, which I moved it to the site assets. So let's go to learning. So I would say in my sources, so everything in the learning folder. So when a document is added to that learning folder, it will automatically become part of what the agent can see. So it's grounded on that folder. So that definitely is a consideration when you are adding libraries. And do we want to add the whole level? If I just hit select at this level, it'll take the whole folder of documents. If I select a document itself, it's only going to be grounded in the one document. So that matters. How you actually construct your agent is with that architecture there. It's a good question, but the answer is no, you don't need to, just depending on how your agent is sourced. Is there a document size limit if you wanted to search a large Excel file? I can't say that I would recommend a SharePoint agent for that. I would definitely recommend like more of a Copilot chat. I've had better luck with that with Copilot chat, or even Copilot in Excel if you have that too. But I don't know if there's any hard limits on that. Do you know, Don or Michelle?
Not off the top of my head. I was actually doing some research on that quickly, but I'm not seeing anything specific as far as size. Okay, Ryan's thinking it's 500 megs. Oof.
Tony said, isn't the folder also limited to 10 docs? Is there a limit on the number of folders? Ooh. That's where this I get.
Yeah, that's why I was looking in there. I don't
this is the only guidance that I have on that. Yeah.
I don't think I see that. That seems pretty low as far as 10 docs.
What I do to test some of those limits too is I will just ask it questions like specifically about, like if there are 100 docs, I'll ask it about something that's like on page 2 or something, or ask like how many files can you see, and just ask the agent and it can give you the answer of what it's looking at. Jason says, is there a way to restrict users to only on SPO sites, not team sites? Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know if there is. There is a way to turn it off entirely for people though. If you are in the admin center here, you can disable the Copilot for SharePoint, which then turns off their ability to build the agents, but then that also turns it off for OneDrive as well. And then there's Copilot in SharePoint for site pages too. So that disables all of it. It's all or nothing at this point. But I don't know if you can, I don't think you could really specify if you could do communication sites or team sites. Tony said 20, not 10. 20 sounds good. I would have to test that out to see what
there is.
What the limit is.
And okay, so here's the question though. I think you were going to talk about this, Heidi, before, is when you're setting it up and you have all those different sources within the agent, right? So is it limited to 20 files, individual files in this versus 20 files that are in, or 20 or 40 or whatever that's in the library? I think that's two different pieces. I don't think I think this is referring to the number of sources as you're setting up the agent versus the number of documents that are in the library. Does that make sense?
It does, and that's the only guide. I think this is the only guide I can find. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I think.
I see.
And so from what I understand, it's because it's almost like what you referenced earlier, Heidi, when you could only reference 10 files when you were referencing files. It's the same thing. It's not about size. It's about, we just have 20 reference points at this time.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So it doesn't matter the number of items per se. It's like 20 different plugins essentially.
Basically, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, 20 different.
I think there are some file, like some file type or size limitations based on the file. I think it's 3 megabytes for a file, and then we don't have it completely documented. I think that's the hard part. But I think the total content across this and scoping is about 300 different pages or 300 different things. So 20 reference points and about 300 files at this point.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.